Today's guest is Jennifer LaGuardia. We shared a stage at an event last year, and since then, she has become a personal friend, a light in my life, and really an encouraging voice. She's a prayer warrior, the podcast host of Your Encouraging Voice with Jennifer LaGuardia. Jennifer serves to awaken hope and inspire faith. When you're at the point in the journey, it looks and feels like all hope is lost. I can't wait for you to hear from her today. I've got a question for you. Who's the person you're being? Are you satisfied? It's okay. This is a judge-free zone, and it's exactly why I started the show. Welcome to Be the Person, a podcast for the brave and the curious who are ready to explore who they are fully created to be. I'm your host, Randall, the adventurous one leading this investigative journey of transformation. By delving into topics and asking unexpected questions, we will discover the keys for unlocking our true potential and being our best selves today. You may be surprised by what you find when you let go of fear in order to discover the answers of becoming the person you were made to be. Welcome to Be the Person podcast. I cannot wait for you to meet today's guest. Jennifer LaGuardia is one of my good friends, and she's also the most encouraging person I've ever met. I just love this lady. Welcome, Jennifer, to the podcast.
Annie, thank you so much. I am so honored to get to have this opportunity with you and your community. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm just excited because I really want people to hear from you. I think they'll hear in your voice how encouraging you are, but also to follow you on social media. You have a podcast, but you have a new one coming out and it's called Your Encouraging Voice. So I can't wait for them to hear more about you. But let's just start a little bit with your story. Tell us a little bit about you, and then we'll fully dive into maybe some of the history later.
Okay, that sounds wonderful. Thank you, Annie. So, right straight away, I'll just start off with my greatest joy, and that is to uplift people. I consider myself an encourager through and through. It is just my most favorite thing in the world. It's just how I live my life. I love to bring joy into people's lives and to uplift people. And it really is a passion of mine to speak life and hope into people's lives, especially those who are at that point of the journey. It looks and feels like all hope is lost. So ever since I was a kid, I've always been someone that just loves to uplift and encourage people. And that's why I was so inspired to do this podcast the podcast that I currently have and the new one that I'm going to be launching. I just, it, I just feel deeply, deeply called. It's definitely a spiritual calling, but I feel deeply called to take all the experiences that God has gotten me through overcoming and help other people overcome.
I love that. And I've
Thank
seen
you.
you do it in so many different ways. I've seen you do it in social media on your own platform, but when you respond to other people, you're super encouraging. And
Thank
you
you.
mentioned it here, like have you always been that way though? That's always something, even as you were little growing up, did you feel like you had this giftedness?
Yes, and I appreciate you saying that, Annie. Thank you. Yeah, it's really interesting because even as a kid, it just has been wired on the inside of me. I feel like it's definitely a spiritual gift uh, that God gave me, and I tapped into it really since I was a kid. I just always was the one. I could always I feel like God gave me the ability to really see people. I really could. I'm very empathic, and I could pick up on if somebody just needs that encouraging voice. So ever since I was a kid, I was always the one going around being everybody's cheerleader.
Yeah.
I've always loved that. I've just always felt drawn to do that kind of thing for people. Everywhere I go with friends, just strangers everywhere I go, coworkers, like all throughout my life, I've always been that way.
Well, I feel lucky to have you as a friend because I have some of your voice texts that you will send, just encouraging messages or prayers, and then some of your regular texts. And there are things I think people just want to hold on to and keep. Like sometimes I have this drawer full of cards too, of like when you need to, I don't know, feel encouraged that you have those go tos. So I think not only do you do it in the moment, but I think people would keep those. I know I have and replay them when you're having a bad day.
Annie, I really appreciate that. In fact, that is actually something that I do on the side for people who have loved ones who are going through something really difficult. So, and I, and you already know this. So I love to pray over people. That is another deep, deep passion of mine. I'm very passionate about prayer because of how powerful it is. And it's amazing when you pray for somebody else. I mean, God hears us whether we're praying for ourselves or our loved ones, but I can feel there's something very profound when you're praying for somebody else. I can feel the energy of God moving through me. So it's something that I love to do. And that is something that I do this for friends. I do this for people I don't even really know well. It's strangers. Uh, Leave prayers on voice texts or on social media messenger, but it is also something I do on the side. It's almost like a greeting card, but digital, where if there's someone who has a loved one going through something, I'll get the person's information and then record an encouraging message speaking to that situation, and then say a prayer over that person.
Wow.
But just as far as like just wanting to, just as my everyday thing, it's something that I love to do. If anybody ever asks me, could you please pray about this for me? It's my honor. Like it's something that I love to do. And I love to do that for you, Annie. And I appreciate you mentioning it. It's really something that lights up my heart.
Yeah. You can tell because you do it so, so well. And you do it in just a way that's really powerful, I think.
Thank you.
Has there ever been a time like you are again so encouraging and I see you do it again to multiple people in the circles that we've been involved with. But is there ever a time when you got yourself in trouble with that where you thought you could encourage somebody maybe to change or I don't know, just a different boundary that you maybe should have set that you didn't with it?
Yes. So where light, yeah. So I was chronically codependent. And I didn't realize how serious that was until I had gotten into a relationship that was I got into a horrible situation. It was way over my head. Um so I feel like God gave me this strong intuition, but I always second guessed it. My issue was with codependency, as with most codependents, you kind of have this innate desire to want to change, save the world.
Yeah.
So I had this thing. I always felt like I could come to someone's rescue. I can fix their problems. I can save and fix them no matter no matter what their issues are. And I genuinely believe that God wants us to show his love, of course. And I believe that God gifted me to speak into people's life and to be that encouraging voice. But you've got to exercise discernment. You can't entering into a relationship that's toxic is definitely not a God thing whatsoever. And especially having the mindset, okay, I know that I can fix and change this person is not wisdom because we can't fix or change anybody. Only, that's between that person and God. Um, but I just really felt like I got so, I got to the point where I was jumping from relationship to relationship thinking, like, these people were very, very toxic, but I always saw the potential in them, and I genuinely thought, "Okay, I could love this person into, being healthy emotionally and psychologically, and I can, you know, I can make their problems go away. And I had this mentality, and I got myself into some very dangerous situations with toxic people, going from one abusive relationship to another. And I couldn't understand uh why do I keep doing this? It's not like I'm purposely looking for people like this, but it's like they were drawn to me, kind of like a magnet, and I was drawn to them. I was just always drawn to feeling like, okay, I know that I can love this person to wellness, and got myself in way over my head.
And can you tell us a little bit? I know that you were married before. Was that the case in your marriage?
Yes, yes. So just to give like the quick backstory, I had been jumping from one toxic relationship to another, and I really didn't realize how chronically codependent I was. And with each relationship ending, it kind of felt like a pe- it felt like a funeral that would never end. I kept looking for that my sense of self-worth and my own value in these relationships. And it got to a point where my sense of self was wrapped up in, can I make this person's life better? It was very performant. My sense of self-worth and value was locked up in, you know, another person. It was locked up in relationships. And so going from one bad relationship to another, not understanding, why do I keep attracting the same person? Like I didn't know how to break out of it. So I met my ex online, and God always gives us, he'll send the signals, he'll send the red flags. And I saw them. But at that point, I still had this thought in I wanted to believe that this person could be the one. And I saw these issues. He lived out of the country. So we did not spend a lot of time in person before getting married. It was just on the phone. And I picked up on so many red flags, but I just wanted so badly to believe that love could fix him. The love could fix these issues, and
Yeah.
we can move forward and live the dream. And obviously not exercising wisdom and discernment, but I just, at that point, was in such a broken mess inside, and didn't realize how messed up I was inside, that I jumped in, I got into this relationship, I married him. I should not have married him, but I did. And the second after literally within hours after saying I do, after we crossed the border together, he lived out of the country. I moved to where he was. His true colors really came out, and I realized that I had made the biggest mistake of my life. And I mean, it was a narcissistic, abusive relationship for 3 years, and it was it was psychological and emotional, but it could have gotten physical if I wasn't able to talk him down. He was very had a dangerous temper, and I'm very grateful that, like, it's miraculous that it didn't get physical, but it was like very traumatic living in that environment day after day, not knowing what or when he was gonna blow up, what was gonna cause him to blow up, and when he was gonna blow up.
My
So
gosh,
I but
yes.
I yeah, so I did not tell a soul because I felt so ashamed for jumping into this situation, having saw the red flags, but thinking I can make it, I can make this work. So I tried it here again. I kept thinking I could just love him into a different person. I can shower him with all the love that I could possibly shower him with, and turn him into a different person. And I tried getting us into counseling and you name it, and nothing worked. And so finally, this is in the middle of the night. I'm driving home from work in a mind blowing depression. And I just kept crying out to God, how did I get here? How did I get myself here? And I just don't really understand, why is this my story constantly? I mean, that was the only time I had been married. Every other relationship, ended before going to the altar. And I just kept praying that God would open his eyes and just cause a miracle to happen and make this work. And the biggest miracle of my life happened, Danny. God opened my eyes. And I realized in the middle of that night, in this horrible, broken state, like rock bottom moment emotionally, I just didn't even want the next day to come, that depressed. And God, I felt the presence of God in the car with me that night. And I'd always had a relationship with God. I always loved Jesus, but there was like I just could not understand this disconnect. Why am I perpetually in this awful cycle with men? And God revealed to me that this issue was within myself, that I was chronically codependent, constantly seeking my own value and worth in another person and attracting these people who, you know, uh, were very, very toxic. I did not have any standards for my life. I didn't know how to set boundaries for my life. So God showed me that I needed to value myself and find my own value and worth in Him. And that I had been seeing my own sense of value through the lens of a lot of brokenness, a lot of failure and trauma and rejection. And I needed to see myself through God's lens, which was pure unconditional love. And I didn't even know how to love myself. I didn't even really understand what does that mean. So at that moment in the car, like I recognized that I didn't even know how to receive unconditional love because I felt like that's something you have to perform for and win. So I felt this presence of God. It was the most powerful, overwhelming sense. You can't even describe it in words, but I know that it was God. And I knew that God wanted better for my life and God wanted me to recognize that I needed to receive his unconditional love. I loved him, of course, but I didn't really understand the concept of unconditional love. And so at that moment, I realized that I had a phenomenal amount of healing that I had to do within myself to break this cycle. So, you know, I was on a mission with God to do this. And so long story short, I was able to get out of that situation safely and get my life back. And the healing journey was like the biggest turning point of my life, and that involved having a healthy relationship with myself, which I had never had before. And it deepened my relationship with God. And it's what caused me to want to take everything that God had taken me. It's the thing that inspired me to want to help other people through my own journey in the way of the podcast and sharing messages with people that would really help them with them being in that place of feeling like all hope is completely lost.
As a busy mom and entrepreneur, eating healthy can sometimes be hard. But Thrive Market is one of the places I love to shop because they make it super simple, deliver right to your house. They have snacks, staples, everything that you need to be healthy at very competitive pricing. They are offering our listeners 40% off your first order. That link is in the show notes. Check it out today. Oh my gosh, thank you for sharing that with us. I know that's part of your story, but also a hard part. And I just appreciate your vulnerability and truthfulness in sharing that because, oh my gosh, I have about 100 questions now for you. Because I think a lot of people, I know this was very true for me up until it's been a few years ago, but that your self worth was tied to performance. And we live in a culture where I think this is so true. Like, what did your numbers look like? What do you look like? How fast can you run? What is the weight on the scale? What are your grades? Whatever it is, whatever stage in life and you put value on, I think that's oftentimes how we judge ourselves.
Yes.
Yeah. Instead of looking really at God's judgment, and you're right, like that unconditional love. And I feel like I learned those value or that probably a year or two before COVID. And honestly, I was so glad I did because I mean, COVID was super difficult for me and just shutting down studios and all of those things. But I think if my self worth had still been tied to the number of members we had or number of workouts, it would have taken a whole different change, for me. So I can imagine that we have people maybe that haven't even thought about that because I know it was somebody talking about it for me that really made me think, "Gosh, what do I tie my self-worth to?" Yeah. So I think in hearing your story, a lot of people will realize that, um, but you, I think, mentioned that, you weren't using discernment. You saw those red flags. And is that something I think we learn from our past mistakes, but do you feel like you learn from that and you can still be the same encouraging person, but just watch for where maybe you need to put up a boundary?
Yes. So I pray for wisdom and discernment every single day. But part of that healing journey, what I love to try to help other people with is right, understanding what it really means to know yourself, honor yourself, and have standards for your life. And the more you free yourself of the more, the longer you're away from a toxic relationship and get healthy on the inside, you lose the temptation to settle for anything that is less than God's best for your life. You lose the temptation to settle for anything that is not in alignment with who you are and where you're going in life. And I can, like, the second that I pick up on something that this, I, I have this thing. I feel like we should show love to all people, but like I vow to myself, I will not ever get myself into this type of situation again. So if I come across someone who's toxic, show them love, but love from afar. I will not get involved. You know what I mean? Like there's just there's a difference between showing somebody love and being kind and gracious and not getting involved with that person. So I'm extremely mindful of who I get involved with, whether it's a friendship or relationship. I've been single since, long since, the divorce, and I've gotten myself healed and uh, holding out for God's best.
Yeah.
And so in terms of relationship, I'm very, very careful who I surround myself with. But, just whether it's coworkers or friends or just, more casual interactions, I can pick up on what's toxic and what's not. And again, I try to be a loving, encouraging person everywhere I go with everyone I interact with. But I'm just very, very careful the degree of how I get involved with someone.
Yeah. And I think that's so smart. You said it replayed in your life over and over until it finally sunk in. But I think you're super self aware that a lot of times, people keep going over and over and you keep learning or you don't really learn the lesson. It just keeps appearing until you do learn it. So I love that for you. And I feel like God has something like miraculous for you because of that.
Annie, thank you. Well, it means everything to me to be on the flip side and to be able to help other people who struggle, and not even just with the same types of issues that I had struggled with, but really there's a lot of stuff that I've been through throughout my life. And it's such a big deal to me, getting to share messages that could speak hope into other people's lives who are at a point where their faith is flatlined. So whether it's on social media or a personal interaction around the podcast, it means everything to me just to be at, be in a good place where I can speak hope into other people's lives. And even if I'm having a bad day, it's still a high for me to encourage somebody else. But that's probably the biggest thing that I'm just the most grateful for is to be at a point where, I can be that encouraging voice to other people based on everything that I've gotten to the other side out.
Yeah. I love that. And it's also hard of just, You do hope so well. You give people hope, but I think God brings us on this journey and it has some valleys in the journey. And to be able to then see on the other side of that valley and speak hope into other people that are there is such
Yeah.
a gift. And yeah, again, that's something I love to see you keep doing.
Thank you, Annie.
Tell me a little bit about, you talked about self-love. You talked about you didn't love yourself. And gosh, I think again, a lot of people probably resonate with that. When we think of the voice that we talk to ourselves with, this was one thing I really had to change because it was such a mean voice. And to flip that around and to yes, really love myself. But I think when people hear that, they think, okay, yeah, I want to do that, but like I don't know how. Like what are some steps or things that you did to help in that process?
Okay, love this question. So, the number one thing was understanding, first and foremost, and this is something I have to keep reminding myself, your worth is not tied to performance. You don't have to win.
Yeah.
Win love, you don't have to it's that whole mentality. Like you have to realize that your worth is not tied to anything but God. And you have to, and this I cannot express this enough. Your worth is embedded in the heart of God. God, you are created in the image of God. You are created out of the heart of God. You are a part of God's heart. He loves you beyond anything or anyone that you could possibly imagine loving. So your worth is precious, more priceless than anything you can possibly imagine. Your intimate connection with God. So knowing that, and I know that sometimes that's a hard concept but it's just something like that's the number one thing. Outside of that is know who you are. Who did God authentically create you to be? Take time to really know yourself. So here again, like I was mentioning earlier, my identity was locked into a relationship. I identified myself through the relationship. I really didn't know myself. So taking the time to really get to know you, get to know, what inspires you, what makes your heart beat, what's kryptonite to you, get to know what is, find, start to really soul search and, look for God's, sometimes it takes time to really get clear on life purpose and calling, but be on a mission to really pursue what are the things that you value the most? What are things that you really feel drawn to and feel led to pursue in the way of life calling and life purpose? Those types of things, really understand it. And then the other thing is you have got to set standards for your life and you really have to make a practice to honor you have to protect those standards and honor those standards with boundaries. So I didn't realize that I really didn't have any standards for my life. I just kind of felt like just love one, love all. And obviously here again, you want to live your life loving people, but you have to be very, very careful who you let in to your inner circle. You have to be very careful what you will allow into your life, who you get involved with. You have to be very, very particular with, how do you allow, how are you letting yourself be treated? Relationships are just that's a huge factor. So that was a part of really being able to establish my sense of worth is how I was allowing myself to be treated, whether it's friendships, anything. Um, and then setting boundaries that I vowed that I would stand in to make sure that those, things that I value, my own personal sense of self was not being violated and not compromising this for anyone or anything. Um, it's a practice. It really is. But that's how I started to really build this sense of self and understanding how to honor myself and the person that God created me to be.
Oh, really good, I think, and like super practical. Like I feel like people could take those and start to implement those. I know for me, like, I really had to look in the Bible, like, who does God say that I am? And
Yeah.
I remember, like, journaling out some of those things.
Yeah.
And I heard a saying one time that really reminds me of what you just said of, like, you teach people how to treat you,
Yeah.
like, what you allow in, and
Yeah.
what you don't allow in is super
Yes.
important.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that you've made that change and you've just switched those boundaries because boundaries, again, are really tricky. In the first
Very tricky.
Yeah, the first time because again, I think we're both, like, really nice people, like, we wanna be kind, we want people to like us, and when you set that boundary, again, it doesn't mean you're not being nice, it means you're really being protective of who you are. Um, did you get pushback when you started setting those boundaries?
Oh my God. It took a solid 3 years and I felt very isolated because at the time, the majority of the friendships I was in, I had, honestly, they weren't healthy friendships. They were all very toxic. So, and again, I'm a very loving person. I'm not, you know, and it was very, very hard, but I had to slowly back away and walk away from almost with the exception of a handful of people who I'm still close to this day. I mean, almost all of the friendships I had were toxic, and I had to just it was like a massive cleanse, but I mean, it was gradual. It wasn't like a cut off. It was definitely gradual. But so as far as pushback, yeah, I got a lot of I did get a lot of that, and it was just amazing how the healthier you get, the more you realize, wow, this is not okay. I can't believe I put up with this for so long. And it just makes you that much more sensitive. So I just uh, basically like allowed to dissolve almost all the friendships that I had in that window of time, with the exception of a handful of who were really, really strong, healthy people.
Well,
Yeah.
you can see that, sometimes that can be really hard to step away. And
Yeah.
like you said, it didn't happen overnight, but some of it you grow distance from those people.
Yeah.
But you have so many people in your life now that I can see around you that it's just that are so positive and so great for you that I see you on the other side of that and it makes me just happy for you.
Annie, thank you. I cannot thank God enough for the people he's brought in my life. I am so blessed. And you are one of them, my friend.
Yes.
Very, very
I love
grateful,
that.
very honored.
I love that. I've heard it said that you're most qualified to help the person that you used to be. And I really see you doing that on social media, like your prayers and how you speak to people. Do you feel like you're really helping the old Jennifer?
Yeah, 100%. So most of everything that I put out there, the prayers that I pray over people, the encouraging messages that I'll share with people, or both, it's most of it is based on what I was going through, what I've overcome in the old version of me. But I will say that sometimes I will put messages out there that I'm trying to encourage myself, prayers that I've prayed over myself. I will share it on social media to help anybody who might currently be going through the same thing. So it's a mix for sure.
Yeah, that's good. I love that
Thank you.
because, gosh, I think we can use our own story and help other people because when you're in it, if you think about, gosh, you were back in your marriage in a whole different country, and you mentioned it, feeling all of that shame, but you don't want to reach out. You like almost just isolate. To
Yeah.
hear the voice of hope, I think is so encouraging and so powerful during that time.
Thank you.
Yeah. I
You
know that people are definitely gonna wanna connect with you after hearing your story and hearing so much about this. Can you share, like, what is the best way to do that?
Well, I would love for everyone to connect with me first on Instagram. That's the best way to reach me, at Jennifer LaGuardia Hope. And my older podcast is Awakening Hope with Jennifer LaGuardia. The new one I'm going to be launching at the end of this month. It's Your Encouraging Voice with Jennifer LaGuardia. It's not launched yet, but I'm not sure when this recording will be uploaded, but I it's in the process of happening. Your Encouraging Voice with Jennifer LaGuardia. But as far as connecting with me personally, please, I would love for anyone listening to this who wants to reach out. It's the best place is Instagram at Jennifer LaGuardia Hope.
Awesome. I'll put both in the show notes or all three. And I know people are going to want to follow you and hear more of your
Yeah.
voice.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
And probably about the time that this comes out, my guess is you'll be launching. So that'll be great timing and super excited because people can go listen.
I'm so excited. Annie, thank you so much. This is truly an honor to do this with you and connect with all of your listeners. Thank you.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And I appreciate your time and you doing this and just being that encouraging person. I know, again, you've been in my life and so many others. So I appreciate you joining Be the Person podcast. And for all of those listening, if this is something that you know somebody that needs that encouraging voice, just share this episode with them. And always, if you would give us a 5-star review on the podcast, I would truly appreciate it. Thanks for joining today.
Thank you.